When Humongous Entertainment first opened for business in March of 1992, they were ready to take the big step into the adventure game world. But what would their first ever game be about? It'd have to epitomize who they were and what the company's main mission statement was. I got it! How about a talking car? Then what you'd get is Humongous's first ever game series, Putt-Putt. The games center on the title character, a young purple convertible going off on various adventures across his home of Cartown and beyond. Whether it's preparing for a pet parade, fixing up a soon-to-open zoo, or even traveling through time to the past or future, Putt-Putt does whatever he can to selflessly help others along his quest in order to achieve his goals. It all started in the mind of Humongous's president and CEO, Travis, with the first one being about Putt-Putt saving a cat caught up in a tree. This, of course, would serve as the groundwork for the series' world and characters. When it came to developing the actual adventures, the team would basically toss around some ideas until they came across a particular one that caught their eyes, and from there, they put together the game's story and create the necessary environments. For the characters, they had to think about their personality, what kind of vehicle they should be, and what their purpose is. Once they've locked those down, they then turn their focus onto their look and design, as well as experimenting with different color schemes. From there, the crew would storyboard each scene of the game while also checking to see if they transition correctly. Then they move on to doing the backgrounds, record the voices, do the animation, which apparently many of their games, except for the MS-DOS ones, use 30,000 individual drawings, and after that, they have an entire team dedicated to coloring the frames and animating all of the clip points. When it's all completed, it's handed off to the programmers to write in the codes that make the games respond to whatever the player selects. Then it's sent off to the sound effects programmer to, well, program all the sound effects in, and last but certainly not least, they create the score for each game. Of course, like many games, there were some aspects or elements that were cut out from the final game, so I'll attempt to bring up some of the more interesting and notable bits as we go along. So, now that we've got all of that out of the way, let's get into the games themselves. In the first game, Putt-Putt joins the parade. Putt-Putt wants to participate in the annual Cartown Pet Parade, but there are 3 things he needs to do first before he can join in. Get a car wash or a new paint job.
So you'll need to earn some money.
But how?
You could mow some lawns.
But I don't have a lawnmower.
Here, borrow mine.
Then a balloon and a pet. More specifically, he wants a puppy, which he finds in a dark cave. As far as Humongous's first game goes, it's very cute, sweet, and charming, with some surprisingly good bits of humor sprinkled in, like this bit.
How can we march with
Where and what you're supposed to do. The backgrounds and character designs look quite good, especially for the MS-DOS at the time, even if some of them look a bit off at times. As for the gameplay itself, it too is fairly simple, as all you do is go around Cartown and gather up what Putt-Putt needs for the parade. The only kind of replay factor it has is changing up the order, like getting the balloon first, starting on Red Street, or choosing to get Putt-Putt a new paint job towards the end instead of a car wash, or even doing both. In fact, plenty of the games follow this formula. Now, if you're an avid fan of the games, you may have noticed that the early ones don't have any lip syncing. Just for this. One was, of course, to save on time and money, as the game was made on a budget of $125,000. The other reason was it was during a time of change. You see, this was during a time when many PC games were slowly making the transition from being mostly text to being talkies, but it proved to be a bit of a challenge. Keep in mind, even at the time, the MS-DOS had very limited capacity, so the crew had to work within the system's limitations and kept the games at a low resolution. Plus, adding lip syncing to a CD-ROM game was considered a technical feat the crew felt didn't need to be conquered, and even after making the transition to Windows, the team never actually did any lip syncing, but instead added and/or when a character goes, ooh, so their mouths wouldn't end up be flapping all around during the scene. If you look closely, you'll see that they use 3 to 5 different animated lip movements and then sync them up with the dialogue. hence why it looks like an anime dub straight out of the 1980s. When the game first came out of the garage on October 30th, 1992, critics gave it some good reviews for its gameplay, title character, and its appeal to kids. As for the game sales, it did very well, selling over 300,000 units in its first year, making it Humongous Entertainment's first hit. Naturally, they would develop a follow-up, which would be released the following year with Putt-Putt Goes to the Moon. In this one, Putt-Putt takes a tour of the fireworks factory run by his good friend Mr. Firebird and has a swell time. Oh wait, did I say has a swell time? I mean he accidentally gets blasted off into space via a large firecracker. Because that's a totally normal thing that happens at a fireworks factory. So now, with the help of their new friend Rover, they have to go across the moonscape in order to find the missing parts to a rocket so that they can get back home to Earth. Now, this one upped the challenge in almost every aspect. While the first one was more of a slice of life story and had a, pardon the pun, down-to-earth tone, this one definitely felt more like an adventure as there's much more going on and more activities for the player to do. Not to mention, it did level up the challenge by changing things up more than the first game did, including which key you need and what apartment floors you go to in order to get the rocket fuel. If we ever see humans in the Putt-Putt universe.
I was brought here from Earth by some astronauts, but when they went home, I was left behind.
That's too bad.
It's also the first Humongous game to have music scored by George Alistair, the Batman Sanger, who would go on to compose the music for a couple more.
Accused of purposeful wrongdoing and criminal neglect. It is believed that Mr. Firebird's negligence caused Putt-Putt's unfortunate accident earlier today.
Of course, this was an in-joke by the developers, so it wasn't really meant for the final version. Besides, had it been kept in, it would have painted Mr. Firebird a lot more as a villain. When the game blasted off on October 1st, 1993, critics gave it even more positive reviews than the first one, saying that they liked how it challenged kids' problem-solving skills. And since Putt-Putt Joins the Parade was already a big hit, it is safe to say that Goes to the Moon was another big one. 2 years later, Humongous released the third game, Putt-Putt Saved the Zoo. It's the day of the grand opening of the Cartown Zoo, and Putt-Putt volunteers to deliver some zoo chow to the new zookeeper, Outback Al. But when he gets there, he quickly finds out that not everything is ready to go. To which I mean it has problems like a raised river dam, broken ramps, raised bridges, and of course, 5 baby animals have gone missing. Now it's up to Putt-Putt to help rescue them all before the zoo can open. How the heck Outback Al let all of that happen is anyone's guess. As the first Putt-Putt game for Windows, the team did a great job transitioning the series to the system, as it introduced Putt-Putt's more recognizable design as well as refined the world of the game. As for the gameplay, this one is much more in line with Joins the Parade, where all you do is go around the zoo gathering up the necessary items needed to help the baby animals out of their specific predicament. The backgrounds and the entire look of the zoo is very vibrant and colorful, and they do a great job of making it feel and look massive. Also, they don't shy away from throwing in a few Easter eggs here and there. Not to mention, it can get pretty meta at points.
You very creatures, we're very pleased to meet you. I haven't written this verse yet, but I will write it, and it will sound much better than when we had a wet.
Oh, and for anyone who's thinking it, no. The inclusion of lions in this game was in no way influenced by The Lion King. It's nothing more than a big coincidence. Now, this game is not without its flaws. Since this was the first Putt-Putt game to be done entirely in hand-drawn, there would be a few occasions where the characters would go off model, especially Baby Jumbo during his encounter with the giant mouse, as he would constantly change positions in different shots. Though of course this was due to the animators needing to properly composite him in. Another, but really minor one, would be some of the side sections. The rapids and taking photos of the zoo animals are plenty of fun and enjoyable, but they really don't contribute much to the game as a whole other than acting as optional side quests. But even with those flaws, that doesn't take away how fun and enjoyable this game really is. Also, trivia note, the crew would insert the cow into almost every game as both a nod and tribute to Joins the Parade, which goes to show just how much care and respect the crew behind the games had for them. At this point, it's a good time to bring up something I neglected to mention during the prologue. Prior to Tomo buying them out, there was a brief time where the games were released on Android and the iOS by Nimbus Games Inc., with Saves the Zoo being the very first one released. It was also, for whatever reason, released on Big Fish Games. When the game welcomed players to the zoo on March 3rd, 1995, like the previous ones, it was a hot seller. In fact, the series had sold over 1 million units from just the first 3 games alone, with Save the Zoo having sold an additional 100,972 units in 2001. And once more, critics were giving it positive reviews. Jumping ahead another 2 years, Humongous comes out with Putt-Putt's 4th adventure, Travels Through Time. On the day he's going to school, Putt-Putt pays a visit to Mr. Firebird, who has converted the fireworks factory into a laboratory following the incident Goes to the Moon, and has finished building a brand new time portal. However, a mechanical malfunction occurs, causing the portal to open up and sends Putt-Putt's history report, school supplies, and pep into 4 places in time. So now, he must travel to 3 points in the past and the future to retrieve his things and pep so the portal can be closed for good. Boy, with stuff like this happening, it's no wonder Mr. Firebird doesn't show up again after this game. Out of the 7 Putt-Putt adventure games made, this is the first of only 2 games to have true interchangeability, where it shuffles up which item ends up in which time period, giving it the distinction of having the most paths for a single Humongous Entertainment game, with a grand total of 16 paths. As for the game itself, the team did an admirable job of designing and capturing the feel of each time period, while also taking full advantage of the game's interchangeability. It's also cool to see the various vehicles of the respective time periods and having their roles and characters fit in with each setting, although they do take Putt-Putt being from the future or past a little too easy. Not to mention, some of the line reads might come off a bit suggestive out of context and somewhat addictive. On a side note, the game's working title was Putt-Putt's Adventure Through Time, but this of course was later changed to its current title. I guess going with Putt-Putt's Excellent Adventure would have been too obvious. When the game came out of the lab on June 6, 1997, it became the 4th best-selling game in the PC Kids Edutainment category, and critics were loving it, calling it outstanding, delightful, and uncomplicated, in a good way, and praising it for its abundance of clip points and for being more challenging. And Putt-Putt is invited to join the race on behalf of his friend Redline Rick, but failing the race, while also helping out the other denizens along the way. Essentially, Putt-Putt had beaten Pixar to the punch by over 8 years. It's another solid effort in the series as it returns to a more slice-of-life based plot that makes a whole lot of sense. After all, being a game series set in the world of talking cars, you knew they were inevitably going to do a racing game. This is also the only other one to have any interchangeability, though not as much as the last game. Also, unlike the other game, this one has a few more problems. For starters, some of the mini-games. The Pounding Nails one, while plenty of fun and somewhat addictive, is so basic it's almost impossible to lose at. Next, there's the bottle collecting section. Although a convenient way to earn coins, you need to get 3 of them in order to earn 1 coin, and they won't always appear when you want them to the most, which can lead to a bit of frustration. Then there's the farm maze. Pooh boy. It is very tedious, as the player has to make Putt-Putt go through it step by step, including the turns, instead of having them happen automatically. Not helped by the fact that some of the needed fruits and vegetables are placed in a faraway spot. Fortunately though, the further you click down the path, the further Putt-Putt moves, making this section at least a little more bearable. Other than those, the game still has plenty going for it. It was nice to finally see Car Town again after several games. Sure, it was seen a bit at the start of Save the Zoo, but this is the first time it's been fully seen since Joins the Parade, and it's great the crew went the extra mile to have the first hub laid out exactly like how it was in the first game. It's also cool that the town was expanded upon, introducing new locations as well as bringing back some side characters from previous games. The actual race, though simple in mechanics, is quite challenging, as the player has to continuously avoid crashing or bumping into other racers and obstacles in order to gain a strong lead and win first place. The game was first unveiled at the 1998 Electronic Entertainment Expo in Atlanta, Georgia, where it went over quite well. And when the game officially came out to the starting line on October 16, 1998, critics praised it for its animation, characters, user interface, charm, and for being overall entertaining. And it was easily another sales winner. 3 months after its release, Humongous held a special week-long celebration on their website, offering free demos, online games and contests, and various other items. 2 years later, Putt-Putt would get his next adventure, and the third one outside of Cartown, with Putt-Putt Joins the Circus. In this one, Putt-Putt and Pep are on their way to see BJ Sweeney's Big Top Circus in Apple Valley, but they get a train ride there from their new friend Cassidy after a goat eats their ticket. Once he gets there, however, he discovers that the whole circus is in a big jumbled mess, especially with the 5 main acts. Thus, Putt-Putt has to help get all of the acts together before opening night. For this one, the team decided to go back to the original format of Joins the Parade and especially entries in the series. While it was nice of them to rekindle the feel of the earlier games, as it's limited to just the 5 main acts, it doesn't have a lot of replayability or challenge going for it due to the puzzles being a lot simpler this time around. Not to mention, having some really easy minigames. I mean, yeah, the minigames in the other titles were also easy, but at least they had some level of difficulty going for them and were plenty of fun. Also, the ending feels rather rushed and incomplete. I mean, after all the effort in helping get the acts together, all the player and Putt-Putt gets in return is a couple of short minigames and a brief glimpse of all the main acts doing their routines. Talk about such a missed and wasted opportunity. Now, all of that being said, this is far from a terrible game. The backgrounds and color work do a great job at capturing the circus atmosphere of the time, and it's nice to see more familiar faces make a return, as well as some of the newer characters being a lot of fun. Plus, some of the ways you help out the main acts is a little clever, and it's always nice to see the series do a little world building. The game made its debut at the 2000 E3 Expo in Los Angeles, where it once more went over well, and when the circus arrived in town on June 19, 2000, critics were once again giving it good praise, this time for its ability to enhance memory skills and encourage problem solving. Sold 82,400 units in the US alone. 3 years later, Putt-Putt will receive his 7th and final adventure with Putt-Putt Pep's Birthday Surprise. After coming home from a birthday party, Putt-Putt notices that Pep is feeling down, and realizes that he's never had a birthday party before, which is understandable since he doesn't know when his actual birthday is. So, as a way to cheer him up, he decides to throw him a surprise birthday party for him the next day, which just so happens to be on the anniversary when they first met. Now, he's gotta go across Cartown and pick up all of the party supplies without Pep figuring out what's really happening. Now, if you think that plot sounds familiar and ridiculous, it really is ridiculous. While this is a noble thing for Putt-Putt to do, and an expected one, there's a good reason people don't go out of their way to throw birthday parties for their pets, let alone a surprise one. In fact, this whole plot would have worked a lot better if a side character like Rover was the one getting the surprise party instead of Pep. But as it stands, while there are some nice aspects to it like the flashback to the first game, some more previous characters returning, and a couple of new locations, this was definitely the most lackluster entry in the whole series. On top of this, by having Pep with him the whole time, this created way too many instances where he should have heard everything or picked up on what was really going on, like continuously getting cocoa from Mrs. Goodbake or going off to play with one of his friends. Not to mention, the game doesn't have a whole lot of replayability, even more so than the last one. Way too easy minigames, some rather weak bits,
I guess that's what you call getting your ducks in a row. How do you like them apples?
I like them. I like them a lot.
and missed opportunities like having both the party and the pet parade on the same day. Seriously, the game would have been a lot more fun if they had mixed the party and the parade together. Just imagine the possibilities. Anyways, as this game was made after the company's 1-2 punch of its founders resigning, and especially the dot-com bubble burst, in an effort to save money while still making sure it felt like Putt-Putt, the crew resorted to reusing backgrounds, layouts, animations, and music from previous games. The end result makes the game feel much smaller and cheaper compared to the previous titles. But the team can't be blamed for this, as they were just doing the best that they could with what they had at the time. Interestingly, there was originally going to be an Apple Orchards minigame where the player would have collected more apples to bring back to Baldini's grocery store, as well as a decorations minigame. But it's not known what or where the latter was going to be. Also, the rubber bands were all going to be different colors instead of just brown, as well as there being a party box, which would have tied in with the cancelled decorations minigame. And it, along with the confirmation card, were originally going to be separate from the party bag.
Abracadabra, abracadiddle, abracadoodle.
You did it!
Okay, you've waited long enough for me to address this, so now let's talk about the one aspect that's changed over the course of the series, Putt-Putt's voice. In the first 4 adventures, he was voiced by then child actor Jason Ellison, but he had hit puberty by the time he was doing Travels Through Time and no longer sounded right for the character. So, for the next 2 games, they hired on veteran voice actress Nancy Cartwright to take over the voice. And for Pep's birthday surprise, due to the company's financial struggles at the time, they weren't able to bring Cartwright back, so they replaced her with Michelle Thorson.
Good morning, Mr. Baldini. Today's the opening of the Cartown Zoo. Great! And then I can show you my history report and my new school supplies. Thanks, Redline Rick. I can't wait. I better get busy. I have a lot of gear to get before the big race.
Wasn't that the best birthday party ever? I think all of Cartown was there. And wasn't that fun playing Pin the Tailgate on the dump truck?
When the game invited players to the party on August 19, 2003, it was met with a rather mixed reception, especially from the fans. Some enjoyed it for its educational aspect, while others criticized it for its gaming mechanics, reusing backgrounds and animations from previous titles, and for essentially copying the plot of Fatty Bear's Birthday Surprise. As for the sales, compared to the other titles, it didn't do very well. Following afterwards, there wouldn't be another new game produced due to the company shifting its focus over to the Backyard Sports series and the company's eventual dissolution in 2005. But they would continue to get re-released through the mid-aughts and later on other gaming platforms including Steam, the App Store, and the aforementioned iOS and Android. Over the course of the series, it would go on to win many awards, including but not limited to Software of the Year, Best Children's Title, and a couple of All-Star Software Awards. Putt-Putt may be the youngest skewing of the Big 4 series, but it more than makes up for it by having plenty of fun gameplay, a lot of charm, some very funny moments, and fun and colorful characters. Join me next time as we take a dive into Goldfish and her best friend.
Go, Putt-Putt, racing up and down the speedway. Well, Putt-Putt's gonna race, and that's a sure bet. He's a groovy little car with a dog named Pep. When he revs up his engine round the speedway, you'll know all the other cars shouting, go, Putt-Putt, go. Go, Putt-Putt, racing up and down the speedway.
When I give the green flag,